Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Psychic Perspectives. This is episode 4 in our 4-part series of the clairs. So we're kind of going to finalize it today. We're going to close up with the last 3 clairs, and then we're going to do a little bit of summary and then add a couple of things at the end. So thanks for joining us, and hopefully you've been enjoying these. All right. So we're going to move into tasting and smelling, right? That's what we thought we'd talk about next.
Yes.
Which is kind of funny because they're probably, in my opinion, like the least used clairs. I mean, do you not agree? It's like, how often
I
does it
totally
happen to
agree.
you?
It's not happened to me very often. And when it does, it's really weird when it does happen, but it doesn't happen very often.
Right,
So.
exactly. And so that's why I thought, well, it would be super quick to talk about those. So for clear smelling, I've actually heard 2 different words. So I think it's a personal preference. I've heard clairalience and I've also heard clairscent. I think it depends on the person that you're talking to,
Yeah.
the intuitive instructor that you're seeing. So, but I've heard both of those terms. And then for taste, I've heard both clairgustance, and I've got those you can see down below. I'm spelling those out for you. And then clairsavorance. So, I've heard gustance more than savorance, and I can't remember the resource where I found that, but I thought, oh, that's interesting. Someone else used a different clair.
Yeah.
So again, clairalience, clairscent for smell, clairgustance, and clairsavorance for taste. So as we talk about smells, I think that's pretty standard, right? It's like random odors and smells without discernible physical causes. But the thing that's funny, so give me an example. Have you had a story of a smell?
So, okay. I don't even know if this is actually, if it was actually, what is it called again? Whatever the heck.
Clairalience.
Aliens.
Okay. You can just call it smelling. That's what I do too, because those are I forget them. I forget them.
I know, right? Okay,
like
so when I was little, we were at the Ellensburg Rodeo, right? And there was like a whole bunch of different, little areas that you could go buy food and produce, stuff like that. And I was in there with my parents, and all of a sudden I had this overwhelming smell that to this day I cannot describe. Like, I don't know how to describe it. It was so horribly pungent that I couldn't figure out how anyone else could stand to be in this area, that I could smell it.
But you were at a rodeo. I mean, there had to have been a ton of different odors going on.
It wasn't anything animal related. Okay. And this is why I can't describe, I don't know how to describe it. Almost like it had more of a synthetic smell too. It might've been like plastic, but nobody else could smell it. And so I was freaking out because I couldn't handle it. I was like, I need to get out of here. Like I left. I walked away from my parents, and I was just like, oh, I can't handle it. Gone.
Well, so did you attribute that then to psychic at some point? And if so, how and what?
I only did later on because nobody else could smell it. And I wondered if it was just something that I had picked up that I don't know what it was. And like I said, the reason I'm so curious about it is because I've never to this day smelt anything like it. Mm-hmm. And the only time I smelled it again was like in an instant, kind of like a memory flash, like it hit me and I was like, oh, I remember that smell.
Right.
So I don't know. I think that could be a good example though, because nobody else would be able to necessarily smell it. But I have had other instances where like I was out, with friends in the backyard, and we'll be talking about somebody that had passed, and then all of a sudden this like peanut butter cookie smell, out of nowhere from outside, and you're like, huh, and we could all smell it. So I was like, maybe somebody's cooking, but it was like, and then it was gone.
Right.
So I'm not sure. So sometimes it's kind of hard, I think, to pinpoint, is this actually spiritual or not, because it's a smell, and
absolutely
it's like, huh. But I don't know. So that's one example, I guess. But also, like when I have done different cases in astral, for example, I have had the smell of sulfur, relating to demonic presence. I have had like the smell of blood or the smell of smoke. Like you can tell that there's been a fire, stuff like that. So it does happen, but honestly, for me, it's few and far between. So
Gotcha. Yeah. No, you raise a lot of really great points, and those are a couple of perfect examples. So we'll use those as we're talking more about smell. I will give a couple as well. And because again, I think you're right. It doesn't happen very often. And one of the things I say is, but how often do we really use smell and taste in our daily lives? Sure, we eat and we taste our food, but generally taste only happens when we're eating something, and then that's the end of it. It's not like our eyes where we're using our eyes all day long. We're really using only our taste buds for a short period of time. Same thing with the smell. Unless something is really overpowering or we're intentionally trying to smell something, they're kind of these tertiary sensory apparatus that we just are not cued into all the time like we are our ears or our eyes, right?
Right.
They're there and they're important survival mechanisms, but they're not on consciously all the time.
Right.
So I think you're right. That makes it very, if it's even psychic, it kind of falls down in that lower category of the clairs of having. But you're right. What if peanut butter cookies was relevant to a spirit that was present? You all would have had to have that discussion. Hey, does this fit for somebody? Does it make sense? Is there any validation?
Well, it did. That? It did. Yeah, it did.
Gotcha. And what's interesting is that everyone could smell it. So at that point, it's like, was the spirit impressing that upon everyone? Had they infected the environment? How did that happen? So, but the other good point you raised too is, it's like, how do you know it's not actually in the environment? Because often when we have tasting and smelling, it seems to be in the air.
Yes.
It's not like a visual that happens in our mind where we know we're not seeing it. It's in our mind. We're smelling it. So we just have a hard time pinpointing that. I think probably one example for me for a smell, because again, it doesn't happen very often, is I was doing a mediumship session, and the spirit had showed up. I had not yet quite started with the client, and I was getting this, it was like a lavender, but not a lavender smell. And it was like, and I'm thinking, okay, is there anything here? And I'm like, I got a candle in my room, but I'm so used to that. I know what that smell is. So it came, it was very short-lived. Short-lived. And then it dissipated. I thought, well, that's really interesting. So then, of course, when this sitter came on, and then throughout the course of the conversation, I told her, I said, I've kind of got this really sweet smell. I said, it's kind of like lavender, but it's not. I said, I really don't understand what that is. And she said, oh, that lady, the spirit, she burned incense all the time. And so for me, that, it made sense to her. Obviously, would I consider that a strong piece of evidence? I don't know,
Right. Standalone, it's not really.
Standalone, it's not. Right. I mean, obviously we would want more than that, but it was enough for me to say it came, it dissipated. It wasn't something that I would identify as a normal part of my home, nor could I rationalize this smell of very sweet type of a lavender. And as soon as she said incense, I went, that kind of is what it reminds me of. But again, I did kind of feel it was in the air. So, but you're right. I mean, smell is just not something that happens that often. And I think that's common.
Pretty rare.
So, but it's worth noting if you're having a smell in a certain situation, especially if you're talking about a spirit or you're in a sitting, to pay attention to it, because it can be a supporting scent, or a supporting piece of evidence. Like you said, peanut butter. I mean, she loved peanut butter cookies, or that was her favorite cookie. It does become a piece of evidence, right?
Right.
I think you touched on something else, though, too, when you were talking about doing investigations. And here's the interesting thing, and I'm going to probably play a little more of the skeptic on this, but you hear people go into investigations, they go into these creepy homes because that's the normal, right? We want to go into a creepy situation. And then we start noting these odd smells and this and that and so on and so forth. And I'm like, well, first of all, you went into perhaps a building that's old. It's going to have odors. It's going to have smells. As you walk, you're going to be releasing, dust, insulation. It's going to generate smells.
Sure. But if you smell roses in a place like that, that's probably not from that place.
Right, exactly. So I guess the point is to be a little discerning though, right?
Right.
And another common one, which people need to understand for doing paranormal investigations, of course, is the proverbial cigarette smoke, right? Or cigar smoke. That stuff stays on surfaces like for years and years and years and years and years. I mean,
Yeah, but if it's super strong,
well,
and you get a whiff of it, I
and
think that's how
paint is the same way because paint stays on for a really long time. So if you're in an extreme of temperature, let's say, for example, the sun just got done beating on that wall for the day, right? For the investigation, and you're there and it's got really hot, that's going to release certain odors and smells into the room.
That makes sense.
Even though, let's say, you're 2 hours there past sundown, but it was 90 some odd degrees that day.
Right.
In that space. So those odors get released into the room. So they can be a result of very normal, rational explanations. So I'm not saying to dismiss everything, but I think, again, it's that careful, critical balance between, okay, wait a minute, what are some normal, rational explanations for this, right?
Definitely. I mean, anytime I think I'm getting some kind of a smell, I guess I'm always looking around to see, where could that be coming from?
Right.
Why did I smell that?
And that may be a reason why people dismiss it even more, even if they have a random odor. It's like, oh, do you smell that? Not to say that every smell we have is psychic related, obviously, but
sure.
Is it something that we really pay attention to? Is it as significant as something that we see or hear? Right. And I think ultimately
not so much. I don't think it is.
Not so much. It has to have context.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I didn't realize blood had a smell. Now I've had the taste of blood, which is kind of going to move me into taste a little bit.
Yeah, blood does have a weird smell. It's almost metallic in some ways. It's hard to explain. It's like a metallic, or I don't know.
No, I understand it's hard to describe. I'm sure that people that are in the medical profession
probably when we talk about gustance, though, if you want to like switch,
yeah, absolutely.
I have tasted blood, metal,
metals. Yes, right.
Yeah,
I get like a
big one.
It's like, go put your tongue on a piece of aluminum foil, right? Or no, this is crazy, but it's funny. Put a penny in your mouth. Gross. Wash it first. But there's this metal taste that you get from that. And it's, so you're right. That has probably been a common thing for me, especially if it's medically related to the person. I've had that in sittings where people's liver are kind of toxic, and I will feel a metal taste, which will give me a sense of metal toxicity. So that's a big key for me. And people have been, yes, that's right. And so again, you want to validate that.
Right.
The other taste, I think, for me was sweet. If you can imagine yourself, but I don't actually taste it. It's more of kind of like of an impression of it. Right. So is that clairsentience, or is that claircognizance? Which one is that?
Right. I've tasted drugs before. Like,
oh, interesting.
Like, like, I don't know if you've ever taken a Tylenol and it like stays on your tongue too long and you can kind of taste it.
Oh, interesting.
That's the kind of, I've had that taste before. I don't really get taste very much. So I have very little. I have tasted the blood. And honestly, when it comes to cases like that, like for me, I'm not actually usually boots on ground in those places. It's all just astral.
Correct.
So for me to pick up on something like that, usually I have to ask the client for some sort of validation, but it could just be, related to the past or something like that. But like I said, it doesn't happen.
They don't. Right.
Often. Like one of the major ones was when we were at a place that had a big fire and we could smell smoke. Like really, really.
But that's again one of those things that can linger for years after too. Now
I know, but I'm saying we weren't there.
You weren't there. No, I get it. Yeah, I was just saying that, but because I want people that are watching though to discern. Yes, you're doing it in astral. You're not there, so it's definitely psychic for you. That is a psychic hit, right?
Right.
Whereas if you're boots on ground in a facility and you're smelling smoke, doesn't mean that you're wrong, but I wouldn't necessarily maybe leap to that being a psi-based experience. It could just be
True. And I think if I
remnants.
had been boots on ground in a place like that, I might have just dismissed a smoke smell, you know.
Right. And you might have picked it up and thought, oh, I'm just getting it from the environment. It's, what
Right.
were you? Was it, but yes, I get it in astral. That's a
Yeah.
very different experience. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's very, very strange.
Yep.
Those are the strangest, I think, of all the clairs.
They are. And that's why I said, we just wanted to touch on them really briefly. I think that they're tertiary. I don't, for me personally, I don't even think that people need to focus on them so much. I think just being aware that if you're in a situation where you're open psychically and you're having some random smells and some tastes, that they can come in and you may want to mention them as a validation, just or get that validation for them.
Right. Just like everything else that we've talked about, it should have some sort of correlation or coupling with something else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Perfectly said. And if you're boots on ground in a situation, always vetting for normal, rational explanations before leaping to the conclusion that you smell cigarette smoke and it must be the ghost of the barkeeper who smoked a cigar all the time, right? Not to say that it isn't, but you would want supporting other psychic evidence with that. And
Definitely.
You want to exclude normal, rational explanations first and foremost. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Great examples. So we talked a little bit in all of our clairs about benefits and drawbacks. And I just wanted to mention a couple of benefits that I had listed because I try to take notes. So forgive me for reading here. We already talked about that fragrances or smells can be connected to a spirit. But one of the things that's also interesting is psychic detective work. I took a psychic detective workshop, and we often don't think about how important smells and tastes can be to psychic detective work. And so I want to talk about that just briefly because some people do have an interest in that. If you're trying to discern something that's happened in a detective scenario, can you smell a smokestack where the crime scene was? Are you smelling sewage, salt water? Are there anything that is unique about how the perpetrator might smell? For example, do they have a specific cologne? Were they smokers? Is there anything that stands out? Tastes can also help you. Same thing for smells, but chemicals, drugs. You already talked about this. Alcohol. Was there a gag? So in other words, does their mouth feel dry? Does your mouth feel dry? And if so, why? You already talked about blood or other items that affect a victim's body. So I think if you're doing some psychic detective work, this was a positive by adding these two clairs to it and working with them, you're getting more clues. It's great that you might see something. It's great that you might hear something. But when you're trying to solve a case, if this is something that's really interesting for you, you may want to further develop those because they can bring in really good clues to help bring additional evidence. So I wanted to mention that because some people are really interested in psychic detective work. And I think that these clairs can actually be big bonuses.
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Because we think to ourselves, well, what's the point of developing it? I think it depends on what you're wanting to do. I have also, again, as I mentioned, medical intuition. I don't really call myself a medical intuitive, but I definitely can sense what's going on sometimes in people's bodies. And oftentimes getting tastes can be relevant to certain situations. So if you have a lot of interest in medical, you may find that tastes and smells also may be significant. So it depends on how you want to apply your psychic abilities.
I don't know that it works that way. I feel like it's the other way around. So it's like you just kind of get what you get. Like anytime I've ever been on a missing persons case, I can't say definitively that I had either one of those clairs, for example, smell or taste. But spirit will give you what you need in order to connect the dots, kind of thing. Although I understand what you're saying as far as like these are good to use in addition and not to ignore, because I think that they're easily shoved off as something else.
That was my point. Because you're right. I mean,
Right.
first of all, okay, well, because that's a twofold situation, right? Is spirit giving you the information, or are you psychically finding that information? One, spirit isn't involved. One is you going out using your own psychic self to retrieve the information. You
Right.
can
But
ask,
either way, you're still retrieving that information in a certain fashion.
you are.
Right.
So if you, because how often do we sweep a smell or a taste under the rug? We've already discussed that we tend to do
Right.
that. So if you say, what do I taste about this? What do I taste in the victim's mouth? You know, what do I taste at the crime scene? Is there anything coming up? We might not normally, I don't normally ask that question when
Right.
I'm retrieving psychic information. I ask a lot of questions when I'm working psychically, especially if I'm looking for health information on a sitter. But I don't generally ask, what am I tasting or what am I smelling? So I think
Right.
I think you make a good point. We may not be able to control it, but at the same time, we do have control to some degree, and we can develop that. But we might not, because we might not think it has any value.
Right.
So if it has value,
Or that it's even a thing.
So if it has value, either medically or forensically, it might be worth something, again, depending on how you want to use your psi, right?
Right.
So,
or how you operate best, I think is.
Well, and that too.
Whatever your forte is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So good points. Good perspectives.
Yes, yes.
And I think we already talked about the drawbacks. The information isn't very pronounced. It can't really stand alone. It needs to have correlation.
Right.
So there can be a lot of drawbacks to using that. It would definitely need to come in correlation with a lot of other clear evidence before you would want to take that. But if you're getting all of that, maybe don't skip by it, depending on what you feel the benefits might be for your sitter or the situation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we're going to switch to claircognizance, and we kind of waited to do that last because we've hinted at some of the other episodes about how confusing claircognizance can be, right? So ultimately, claircognizance is claircognizance is clear knowing, which means that we just know. But the question that we've discussed, and you brought up, especially under clairsentience, how do we know that we don't feel it and then instantaneously know it? Which came first? It's like the chicken or the egg. Did we know it and then we had a feeling, or did we have a gut feeling and then we said we just knew it? Right. So sometimes those lines get really, really blurred. So I don't know. For me, claircognizance is just kind of worth mentioning because there are moments when you just know. But again, it kind of falls in, I think, it's kind of one of those clairs that it's like, we can touch on it, but is it relevant? I mean, what do you think?
To me, it really is blurred between clairsentience, even clairaudience for me, because it's kind of like this download. It's a quick download.
It is. It's like it's an insight. And I know.
It's kind of like when I said before about the knowing that you left your keys at a certain place. Like, I know, like, it's just a know. It's an in you knowing, right? There's a deep no. I don't know how else to explain it.
It's hard to pinpoint. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And it's just good to let people know. You can know without knowing how you know, without any of the other clairs cluing you to that knowing. That's really what claircognizance is.
Right. So I think a good example I'll use is, one where I did do like a missing persons case, and I was given their last known coordinates or the direction that they were headed in. And I looked at a map and I just went, boom, right there. That's claircognizance. Yeah. I mean, it's just boom. I know that's where he is. He's right there.
So you didn't, so there was no associating feeling with it. You didn't hear anything or see anything. It's just, that's where your finger
No,
wanted to go.
I looked at the map. I said, that's where he is. And he was found within a half a mile of that point.
Gotcha.
So I think that's a good example of claircognizance. Now, granted, it was an astral type case where I was still viewing, or I was still trying to view, but in the very beginning, this is how it started. So after I got the initial information, it's just like, boom, this is a knowing, this is where he's at. And then, I astral to him, but it was kind of pointless at that time. But either way, it's just
a good example.
It's an example.
Yeah.
Trying to think. What about you? Examples of knowing.
For me, I'm going to give an example of coupled clairs. And what I mean by that is because I'm clairaudient, because I receive channeled information. What is interesting is I can be hearing what they're telling me. And typically I type that out because that's the way I get it. I will type out the information as I'm getting it, right? But what also comes with that is a complete and utter understanding of the concept being conveyed without the use of the words, right? So the clairaudience is coming in terms of the vocabulary, but then the claircognizance is just this knowing of the concept. I just know what they're talking about. And then
right. Like a concept. I get that. I get
right.
Totally
It's a conceptual awareness,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I tell you here's an example. This just popped into my head, right? Picture a circle, right? You can see a circle in your mind, but now I want you to imagine what's the concept of a circle. You just know what a circle is, right?
Okay. Right.
You don't have to see it. I say circle and you just know what a circle is. So it's kind of this ephemeral type of thing where you just have an understanding of something without any really rational reason for why you understand it. But it can come coupled with other clairs and often does, which is why I think you talked about the fact that, did I have a gut reaction that led to the claircognizance, or was it a coupled type of situation, which, it can be tough to discern, but ultimately, does it really matter?
I don't know. Yeah, because sometimes it is coupled with things. So there's like, you can know something is wrong and have a vision at the same time,
right?
Or have some information like words or something like that. Yeah, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
Especially with people that, you're connected to, like you can have a knowing about people.
And of course that gets complicated, especially if you consider yourself an empath, because much of your knowing may just simply come from this subconscious knowing that comes from the clairsentience aspect. You are not really registering that it's the clairsentience that gave you the knowing, right? You're just having a knowing. And so I think that's why it's like, does it matter? Does it matter that we break claircognizance out into its own clair? I mean, I don't know that I think it really matters, other than the fact that it gets addressed in the community, so to speak.
Right. I think if anything, claircognizance is pretty much the same as clairsentience, if you ask me. And it's very common. I think it's more common than we would think, like a knowing, or like this, like you said, about getting ideas and then wanting to share them right away. It's like, you got this idea. I don't know. I feel like they're like rapid downloads almost.
Well, and and I don't consider it, for me, a download to be a clairsentient experience. For me, a download, again, it happens up here in the mind. For me, it's usually, in the term of a conversation. I will also get visuals. I mean, you've seen some of the visuals that I've brought to you. And if I just drew those visuals, they really didn't have a lot of bearing. But when I was given the visual, I understood the concept. So that's claircognizance. I had to find the vocabulary to convey to you, here's the diagram and here's what it meant, because I just knew what it meant. Right. They didn't tell me what the diagram meant. I just knew.
Right.
I don't want to beat the topic home. I think the point is just to get people maybe paying attention to the fact that sometimes you're going to know things, because that's the ultimate thing about knowing the clairs. You're going to know stuff. You may not know how you know it. You may question it, right? I don't know. Why do I know that? It's okay to ask questions about it, but don't dismiss it. Pay attention to it. It may have some validity, and you can't necessarily justify how or why you know it.
Right. That's the thing. You might think to yourself, that's crazy that I just had this idea. You don't have any validation for it yet. And you're just like in your gut, deep seated, I know, and that might come across as clairsentience because like I said, it's like a feeling, but it's still a knowing. It's more in your head, like you said.
Or this is I have to go do this today. That would kind of be but maybe we have a feeling, right? That could have been a clairsentient thing, or it's just, nope, or I don't know why.
Here's a good example. Here's a good example. When
I'm driving a lot of times. I just got another one too. Go.
Okay. So when I'm driving, sometimes I'll get this like, yeah, you should go this way because traffic's going to be horrible. And 9 times out of 10, if I don't listen, I kick myself because I'm like, I knew it. I knew.
That's a good one.
I should have done
that. Yeah. No, perfect. Yeah. Well, and here's another one I just thought of at the same time you did too. This was several years ago. It was really interesting. We had put one of our pets to sleep. We had 4 dogs at the time, and we had put our girl dog down, and she was, anyway, not well. So we came home, we were grieving, and I said to my husband, and I said, Otis is going to be the next one to go. And I don't even know why that came out of my mouth. There was nothing clairaudient. I wasn't thinking about it. It just came out of my mouth. And he looked at me and he goes, he's the youngest dog we have. Why would he go next? And I said, I don't know.
Right.
I said, that's just what's going to happen. And sure enough, several years ago, we don't know what happened. He just started vomiting blood, and within 24 hours, he was gone. So that would be and I don't mean to share a horrific story, but it's just an example of this knowing of something that even caught me off guard, right?
Right.
Where it's like, wow, why did that come out of my mouth? And so that would be another example of that.
Yeah.
And we may doubt ourselves. And I do want to add a disclaimer to this. Not every thought that comes into our knowing is a psychic hit, right? Because if we're telling ourselves that we're terrible people and we shouldn't be alive, or we should jump off the bridge tomorrow, or we should go punch that person in the face, I'm going to tell you right now, you may be picking up on the anger of something psychically that's making you feel those things. Right. Or they could be coming from your own need for some healing, which is what we're going to be talking about on our next episode, healing. Yay. So I think the point is again, you've got to have some level of discernment. It would be interesting that I would mention, Otis passing next when he was the youngest dog we had. It would be odd for you to go, nope, you better go that way. That's, those may have some validities, but not every sense of knowing we have that comes into our mind may be psychic. So again, we have to develop discernment, and that's true for any of the clairs. So just kind of wanted to throw that out there. I think
definitely. Yes.
But that could be another reason why we dismiss it sometimes. It just pops into our mind and we just think, oh, I just thought that. I thought that.
Yeah. Because it's your natural, it's like, I think about things but yeah, don't go the other way where every little thing I think of is psychic too.
Exactly. And unfortunately that can happen until we get a level of discernment under our belt, where we really don't know where our own creativity, where rational explanation and psi blend. Those are very blurry lines until
that's why I say you have to get a hold of your thoughts. You have to get a hold of what's going on inside of your brain, what's going on inside of your emotional brain. And
it is awareness of self, but it's also awareness of environment, right? Because it's like, what are you smelling? What are you picking up? If you're empathic, or very highly clairsentient, are you in a situation that's overwhelming you because of the external situation? Are you blaming the external situation when it's really an internal situation?
Right.
There's a high degree of awareness, self-awareness, but also outer awareness, mindfulness, they call it, right?
Yeah.
Mindful of self, but also mindful of environment and all of those types of things that are going on, because information is everywhere. Yeah, very true.
Yep.
So I think we've given some really good examples of what it looks and feels like. And so some people say, well, is there any benefits to claircognizance? And I think the benefit for me is because I do get channeled information, I love the claircognizance aspect because I can intrinsically know a concept without having to listen to 2 hours of a lecture about it. Somehow, if spirit is wanting to give me something, I'm going to call it the aha moment.
That's a good
right?
Knowing.
If you've asked spirit for some guidance, right? Because ultimately, I think that that's the highest form of psi we can have, is that connection where the information we gain, it benefits us at a personal level. And we go, wow, I just got this. I just had the aha moment. Something just clicked in your mind. Was that a psi experience? Was it a claircognizant experience? For me, sometimes it is. I'm like, oh, I know they gave me that because I never would have got that on my own. So that can be a really big benefit. It's just a way that you can inherently get it.
Right.
And another interesting thing too is you may get it, but it doesn't mean that you can apply it yet. Right? You have the aha. We were talking about this on the phone the other day about manifesting. It's like I had all these aha moments because I had been asking spirit for guidance. I'd been asking for guidance. I got it. I had all these aha moments. Now I have to take what they've claircognitively buried into me.
Right.
And I have to figure out how to integrate that into my life. So I think that's a really positive or beneficial aspect to claircognizance. Makes sense to you?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always way harder to apply this wonderful knowledge that they bestow.
Right. So we think, oh, I've had the aha moment. And then suddenly, well, I've got it because I heard it. Claircognizant, they gave it to me. I've got it. So that means I have it. 99% of the time you don't have it. You received it. So it feels like you have it.
Right.
You
got to live it.
You've received the insight, you've received the knowledge, but you still have to have the experience and the integration to turn that into personal wisdom and to apply it. So I think that can be a huge benefit to claircognizance that I personally wanted to point out.
Right. I think for me, it's just like it's just like a knowing. And to me, it feels more like clairsentience when I think about it.
And to me, it's the opposite. So I think that's good. That's why we have psychic perspectives, right?
Right.
It's like, for me, it's the claircognizance, because cognizant is knowing. So we think of knowing up here.
I know, but it's like in your body knowing.
That's like exactly right. So if you're more clairsentient dominant, which we had this discussion earlier, I said, you're a lot more clairsentient, I think, than you, not that you don't recognize it, but I think,
I guess I didn't.
I think that's probably more predominant for you than anything else.
Yeah.
That does give you, because that's your primary. So that gives you your knowing. For me, my primary is up in here. So my sense of knowing comes more up here than in that body type of way. So there's no right or wrong. It is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's funny.
I've never known anyone with claircognizance as a dominance. So I don't think there's any need to discuss, ultimately, I think if there's a clair that's dominant, it's going to be visual, auditory, or clairsentience. Although truthfully, I think all of those work in combo. I don't, there will be one that will be very strong for you. But honestly, I think for most people, they all work in a combination.
Yeah, I think a lot for everybody, it's like a coupling. Like I said, you usually get something with something else, because if you were just to get the smell by itself, you wouldn't recognize it. It would be like, I smell cookies. Somebody must be baking.
Right. And I think that's an important point for the clairs overall. As we move into kind of a summary of all of these, is you don't want to break them apart. You don't want to go, oh, well, I only want to use this one, or I only want to use that one. I think the point is just to understand what they are, to understand how they function, to learn how to identify them, so that you can hone in on the signal. That's really the only point of knowing all of this. Wouldn't you agree?
Right. Because if you don't know, then there's no way you could recognize it, for one thing.
Exactly. Right.
And then when it does happen, you'll be like, what was, you won't know. I think for me, it's knowing what the clairs were and how they felt, while they're happening, I guess, was really how my cats are going crazy. Is really how it all kind of came unfolded for me. So I was like, wow, all this stuff. And even though smell and taste are not, something that happens very often, when it does happen though, it's like, wow, that's really weird. And so you shouldn't just shove it off. And to know about it, that it's a thing, is important.
But now that you're further developed, I mean, do you really even think about it anymore? It just kind of happens naturally. At some point, you don't hone in on the clairs. You just recognize, here's where it came, here's where that information is, and that's it. I mean, do you still really think about them at all when your work?
No, I only thought about it because we're doing these videos. It's like, in the beginning, yes. But not when I'm in the middle of it. I'm not like, oh, I'm being very clairvoyant right now.
Well, what about afterwards? I know afterwards, I'm always evaluating where the information came from and what it was like, and was I getting it from one place more than another? Because it differs with the sitter and the spirit, and that's
right. What's the question exactly?
Do you ever analyze after you're done working with a client or in an
about the
investigation?
clairs?
Yeah. I mean, do you really evaluate, oh, this came this way and this came that way?
Not really.
Oh, see, and I'm super analytical. I do.
I do. Yes, I do. I reevaluate it, but not like this was clairvoyance and this was clairaudience. I don't do that. I go over the information because it's important, and I do like to understand how I got it, but not in that way. Okay. Not in like a dissective way.
And see, I'm just very analytical about that. Yeah.
For me, it's more like, wow, that happened. And, how did that happen? Yes, I do break it down a little bit, but not in a rigid way. Like,
no, I'm not rigid about it either. But I guess the reason I'm saying that is so let's say, for example, you're someone that's practicing or you're developing, right? I mean, because as we develop, we tend not to focus on the clairs too much. But let's say that you're practicing with another person, or you're even doing some psychometry. When you're all done, take a look at your evidence, take a look at your insights that you should have gotten validation for, right? Because you want to validate that stuff. And just look for any patterns. Wow, I got a lot of impressions. Wow, I got a lot of visuals, or I got an impression and then the visual came in.
Right.
Now, for me, I've noticed that there are certain spirits that come through that are very visual. I'll get a lot more visuals with some spirits, whereas with other spirits, I may just get a lot of feelings, but I don't hear a lot or I don't see a lot. So I don't have the answers all the time for why that is. And so there's patterns.
Because I think it's because some of the people that you are talking to are better at relaying that kind of information to you. So anybody that was
right, I agree.
Yeah, anybody that was creative or visual in life will be able to give you visualizations in death. That's my theory.
And so those are things that I have said to people, because I've had a couple of times where I thought, I'm not a very visual medium, but your loved one is giving me a lot of visuals. Now maybe that doesn't mean anything to the sitter, maybe it does, but I do notice those things. So that's what I meant by, when you're all done, what are your patterns? Because in developing, if we're interested in developing, a key aspect is discovering your strengths, discovering your patterns, right? If you're constantly getting visuals, then start with visuals each time you sit down with a sitter or each time you start with a practice. That clearly is a strength for you. So that's the only reason I was asking,
right.
is do you,
I think it depends
analyze after the fact?
Yeah. I think it depends on what it is that I've done. So it's like, if it's a mediumship type reading, yes, there's analyzation, and there's analyzation no matter what, but I don't know.
That's okay. There's no right or wrong answer. It was just a question for if you've applied the clairs in any way after you've gotten done. Because I think, again, as people get more practiced, this becomes less of an issue for you, trying to break it down. It really doesn't matter.
I guess I do, because like we'll talk about a case afterwards and we'll be like, yeah, did you smell that? Oh my God, it was so horrible. Or yeah, did you see how, that looked or whatever? I mean, we discuss things like that.
Sure.
And we'll dissect things for other reasons, but usually it's not necessarily about how we got the information. It's like more like what the circumstance was.
You're assessing the case more than anything else.
Right.
And
right.
I do that assessment actually for myself after if any reading I do, I'm always doing a self-assessment, because that's been how I've improved. So I think that's the point I'm trying to make.
I think it's important to always think, maybe how could I have done better, or how could I have pushed myself just a little bit harder to get
right. Or what was interesting about that sitter? Did I get something more or different with them that I normally do? And, that's what I mean by that self-assessment,
right.
And this
how could I have been better?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a little off topic, but it's after every reading or after every sitter, I would sit down immediately after and I would write, what did I learn from this? So I would have notes that I took on what I learned. Sometimes it was emotional stuff where I needed to be more sensitive, or perhaps I should have handled this scenario a little bit better, a little bit differently. But there's also an evaluation of my psychic self and how did I do this and how did I do that? And then I go back the following day and I ask the same question again, because now I've had 24 hours as the practitioner to evaluate my performance. And then I go back and I ask myself, okay, did I learn anything else about this? So I think self-assessment is important, not to break down the clairs per se, but just to evaluate, how did you do? Where are your strengths? Where were your assets? I got a lot of medical stuff today. No, I got a lot about fear today. Those, taking a look at those things just kind of helps give you a dive into your own strengths.
Right. I kind of surprised myself with the whole healing stuff. That's a reflective thing that I wasn't identifying with, that I look back on and I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah. Like I should have been doing this a long time ago.
Ta-da!
Ta-da!
Somebody thinks you're ready. So
self-reflection is important.
Yeah.
No, you're right. And I think it does, because it'll boost your confidence and like, this is what I did well. This is what I need to work on.
Absolutely.
This, message was really good. This is what I gained from it. So yeah, all of those things are really important. You're right. And
it's just a developmental,
even though I don't dissect it.
Tip. Yeah.
I don't dissect it via like, this was clairsentience and this was claircognizance, but you're right. Definitely go self-reflect about the sitting or whatever it was that you did, and really try to figure out how could I have done better, or what was I really good at, and
but you can take note of that. That was how I switched from, I used to walk into my sittings and I used to always start with clairaudience because I thought that was my strength. And I found myself not doing very well with my sitters with the clairaudience, which is really interesting, right? So then I started noting, but I did get my feelings right. So out of that self-assessment, I switched to connecting with a sitter at the clairsentient level. That led me to do a better reading with my sitters because I was getting more from the clairsentience. Then I started to discover a pattern where my clairaudience is almost strictly with higher spirit lessons and information that I'm meant to convey in the form of concepts. It's more channeling. So that clair is very, very dominant in the channeling. With my sitters, I no longer go clairaudience first. I immediately move into clairsentience. It took me years to figure that out. So I think this is why I was saying, assess what happened. Like, oh, well, I'm always hearing things, but when I sat down to do it, it's like I didn't hear anything. Okay, what did you get? Oh, I'm getting all these feelings. And she said it was right. And my body felt this. And okay, then go there next time.
Right.
When you start to hear things, maybe it's a different source. Maybe it's for a different function or a different purpose. Does that make sense why I say to kind of analyze your patterns a little bit and pay
Oh
attention?
yeah, yeah, definitely.
It's just that mindfulness. Yeah.
Right, right. No, I agree.
Gotcha. So, off topic, but relevant.
Yes, definitely.
All right. So I think we've done a good job of highlighting the clairs, probably more than people really wanted to hear. But
overkill on the clairs.
But it's okay. It is what it is. You can skip through it. You'll hear the parts that you need to hear, and after that you can move on. But the last thing I want to do is I kind of just wanted to just highlight some quick points on the clairs overall. And I think ultimately that we understand all clairs provide psychic information, and they're all valid. No one is better than another, right? I used to, when I was first developing and in the community, oh, well, I'm clairvoyant. I see things, and it's like, and then we would be jealous of that person. Oh my gosh, she sees stuff and I don't see stuff. I remember being this way.
Right.
Do you ever remember being like that? Oh my gosh, I was terrible. I'm so embarrassed, but I did run into other people. We would be jealous, or not in a bad way, but almost in this, negative self-assessment way where we would kind of be like, I don't see anything. What's wrong with me? It's like, why do I only get this, or why am I not getting that? And it's like, don't
I
do
do
that.
I do remember kind of being in the middle of a mediumship reading with someone being like, well, I wish I could hear the conversation going on right now. Like I felt like I wanted to be involved. I want to hear, I don't want to just wait for the relay.
It's natural to feel left out, right? Or to feel like we're missing something, or we're at fault because, well, how come that person sees things and I don't? And I think the point is don't put yourself in that trap. All you're doing is shutting yourself down. Just don't. Because I used to do it. It may not be functioning for you at the moment. Don't worry about it. It'll come. Focus on your strengths and stay there, because the more self-confidence you have in the abilities that do work for you, you will become more comfortable, you will become more relaxed, and I promise you the other stuff will kick in. So don't fall into that trap that I fell in. I think is kind of where I'm going with that. The other thing is that I saw sometimes early on in the psychic community, and this was probably 10 years ago easy, is that some people would feel like their clair was harder to deal with than another. No, right? It's like, well, I just feel here's the empath victim thing that we talked about. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I just feel everything from everybody, and it's, I just don't know how I'm going to deal with it. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Every psychic or every clair, right? Every sense has its own challenges and its own benefits. Yes, it probably stinks to take on the sadness of another person, but it also stinks to maybe see things that you don't want to see, to have precognitive moments of horrific accidents, or feeling pain, or hearing abusive situations and arguments going on, right? There are a variety of ways that we are impacted by our psychic senses. So I think the point is they all have equal good benefits and equal challenges. So don't do this, oh, but I'm an empath, you wouldn't understand. I think that really kind of exhausts mentality. Me.
Yeah, victim. You're not a victim, it's a gift. It's a perception about it. So if you want to sit there and cry because you're psychic, then go ahead. But I got better things to do.
Right. And and I'm not, and I don't mean to be insensitive, although I know I've got that kind of, call it like it is, personality.
It is difficult. I will sympathize. It
is. It's a challenge.
But it's not. But the more that you sit there and you say, it's so hard, you're literally reinforcing the fact that it's
absolutely
hard.
That's right. Absolutely. I was on a taking a free education day this past weekend, and there was a gal that was attending, and the whole time in the chat that we're doing this educational presentation, she's complaining about how she can't afford anything, and she didn't understand why the convention coming up wasn't going to be free. And there was just this entire victim mentality that was coming out of her. Why this, why that, why this, why that? And I thought, oh my gosh, this is why this person is poor and feeling at loss. It's
Right.
we're manifesting our own reality, so to speak. I'm not negating that she was having problems, and I'm not negating that the Claires have their challenges.
Right.
Don't let them get the better of you. Acknowledge them. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm having problems as an empath with taking on the physical ailments or emotions of others. That's fine. It's a reality.
Right, right.
But then doing you wouldn't understand. Okay. I don't need to understand. You need to understand. You need to conquer it. So that's all I'm trying to get at. They all have their challenges. They all have their challenges.
You can either control it or let it control you.
Or it controls you. That's absolutely right. And I know that we both think the same on that. Yeah. So again, that's another point. Don't compare. Don't compare. It's hard. I had a friend that she used to see spirits all the time, and it was very disturbing for her. It was all visual. So just because it's not your experience doesn't mean that other people aren't having their challenges with their psychic clairs as well.
Right, right.
I think the other thing, just for summary too, is that all clairs can be developed and worked with. So again, stick with what your dominant clairs are first, and then allow the others to emerge at time. So that's pretty much it as that I had as far as summary points. Anything else in closing for you?
No. I always do that, but no. I think we've covered it. I mean,
probably beat a dead horse.
So the important thing to know is, the clairs are important. We break them down for a reason, because that's how you recognize if you are or are not getting psychic information. So that was why we felt like it was important to do. Right. Other than that, I don't know, unless people have questions or
right. You can, obviously people can always reach out, and sometimes they do get a hold of us either privately or make some comments, which is great. And, we weren't trying to beat it. But again, for those people who may want to go, gee, I really want to hear it because I don't understand it. You're going to be at your level. So this may have been a very overkill for you, but then there's going to be other people that are like, I've never heard this information before. And so we wanted to be sure that we were covering it, and you will get out of it what you need. So that's the reason that we did that. So we thank you for joining the 4-part series. I think the only other thing that I'm going to add here at the end, and I kind of debated whether or not I should do this, was years ago, as I was developing, I found it really confusing in the beginning to go, when I was doing practice, starting off, I thought, what am I supposed to focus on? Which clair do I focus on? So I was all over the place, right? It was like, do I listen? Do I see? Do I feel? And it felt like my attention was all over the place. I didn't know where to bring my focus. Right. And so that is a huge problem if you're wanting to get psychic information. You're not going to receive anything if your brain's going, oh, so I want you to think about it right now. I'm going to give you an exercise. Think about your left ear. No, wait, go to your knee. How's your knee feel? How is it hot? Wait, nope. Now go to your foot. Hold on. Oh, wait, go to your gut. Wait, go back up to your right eye. Is it twitching? Is it watery? Is it dry? Oh, what's going on in your mouth? Do you see how you don't have time to even stop and see how you're feeling?
Right, right.
Your attention is here, 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 here.
Yes.
So for newbies with the clairs, they're doing the same thing. Well, do I go here? Do I go here? Do I go here? Do I go to this clair? Do I go this way?
Right. That's a really good point. That's a really, really good point.
You cannot stop and focus on any psychic information when you're going bing, 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 bing.
That's how I was when I started in astral.
That's how I was when I started doing any kind of psychic work. I was all over the place. You're literally running over the very information you're asking to receive.
Yeah. Seriously.
Which is why they say slow down. But it's also about focus. So
practice the pause.
It's the pause. So first and foremost, if you know what your dominant clair is, start with that and don't go anywhere else. Then you're not going bing, 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 right? Just stick with how you feel. One clair, right? You're holding this object in your hand, and all you want to do is what do you feel? Because then your focus is centralized.
Exactly. That makes sense.
If your clair is voyance and you want to see, no worries. Hold that object and just ask for pictures. Pick one, right? You'll get better later. But for beginners, this is a focal point. Pick the clair.
Pick one or two, I would say, because it's
I would say start with one and then move to the other one.
Yeah, but what we talked about, they're always coupled with something. So I think it's
perhaps
if you're so like, let's say if you're clairaudient, I would say, okay, yeah, like you open up with it, but let everything else happen just in case. So it's like,
it's a fine balance. You're right. You do want to allow. So I'm not saying close it off, but I'm saying don't go looking for it. Just relax into the clair that's most comfortable.
Right.
If you notice that all of a sudden you have a visual, even though you're focusing on a feeling, of course you want to allow that to take place. You don't want to close it off. I would say definitely allow it, but don't allow your focus to go shooting all over the place looking for all of this different information, because then you're consciously moving to all these different spaces and you're not in that passive receptive state.
Right.
Make sense?
Yeah. No, it's good advice, because it is, you could end up ping-ponging all over the place and
you're really getting over the information. Yeah.
Right. Or just really getting, convoluted and distracted and then you don't really know where your information is coming from, and it could be a mess for sure. So that is good advice, but I will say that, like I said, everything is usually coupled with something else.
It is.
So you might start with the sentience, go to something else. Don't close it off, but don't be a ping pong. That's it.
And for me, I wasn't what I would consider a natural psychic. This all happened to me later in life, and I had to work really, really hard to kind of develop it. And my clairsentience was completely closed off. I was completely out of touch with that. Everything that happened was right up in here. And so you may find that there are people that just have certain aspects of themselves that are closed off, especially if there's been, let's say, for example, maybe a lot of emotional trauma. They may have closed off that aspect of themselves. They may be very psychically defended in the heart space. It does not allow them, you're smiling, because we can build a defense in that area, right? We're not defensive about our thoughts. We're not defensive about expressing, maybe our ideas about things, but we're very closed off here in the heart space.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to start getting anything clairsentient whatsoever. Now, if you're naturally psychic, you might find that the opposite is true. Everything comes in and you need to figure out how to stop that. That's a whole nother discussion, because we can come from very opposite sides of the fence. Makes sense? It's just something I thought I'd point out.
I think you're talking about the mental, emotional, physical aspects.
Well, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's also why I want to talk about healing next week too. We want to bring that up, because that's kind of it's like a blanket way to heal, or blanket way to heal, more efficient coverage of healing is mental,
a way to
emotional,
look at it,
physical.
right? It's a way to look at it in the sense that, and I did that as far as psychic stuff too. I did a couple of blogs on what I called them the psychic zones. I hated the clairs. Ultimately, I wanted to focus on a zone, right? And so the first zone I had was what happens from here up, right?
Right.
What do we feel like we need to say? What are we seeing and what's going on in our mind? So I would bring all of my awareness to my mind. When I channel or when I'm looking for information from spirit, for my own personal guidance, it all comes right here. I bring all my awareness focus here, And this is where I expect my answer to come from. So all my thought comes up here.
I think it's important though to integrate the three, or otherwise you're not getting the full picture.
It is, but that's where I start.
Right.
Right. Because again, I don't want to ping pong. So I'll start there. If it's with a sitter, I immediately come to the emotional zone. I want to start connecting with that person, not up here, but I want that emotional connection, because then the other clairs can expand. If someone is asking for health information, I immediately start scanning my body. I'm not even thinking about what they're thinking in their mind or what's going on with their emotions, because for me, this is a physical scan. So now I'm scanning my body. My whole body becomes the tool for which I receive psychic information, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely, because it reflects, or you're mirroring or picking up physically what someone else is feeling, because you're meshing with their energy, so to speak.
Right. And we'll be talking about that more in as you said, when we address the healing, because the body needs healing, the mind needs healing, and the heart needs healing. But as far as developing your psychic abilities, all of those areas pick up information, and they're probably all overlapping. So just pick the one zone or the clair that you want to focus on first, and then develop it, make it strong. And I think everything else just kind of moves gradually. This is a process. You're not going to have it all today. I still don't have it all.
Yeah, exactly.
I still don't have it all.
It's important for people to understand this is a process for sure.
I'm working now to deepen my body as a detector for medical information. And that takes a lot of practice, and I don't always get things right. And if I want to scan somebody's body, do I look at bones, organs, nerves, all of those things. If I want to target those for information, that's really complicated. I can't learn that overnight. Right.
No.
So just recognize that this is a process and be patient with yourself. Don't compare, stay calm, stay focused, and just let it happen. It'll emerge. So
definitely. Yeah.
All right. Well, so thank you for joining us for all of this. And we hope that you will join us next time for a discussion on healing, which is more Sarah's modality than it is mine, but I know we'll have a good discussion about that. So thanks. And we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.